Hi everyone, Joe March here, and today's video, depending on when you're watching it, is either going to be new content or it's going to be something that is reviewed time and time again in the future. Why do I say that? It's because today I'm talking about something called The Teacher, which is something that I plan to reference a lot in my future videos, but I don't plan to explain again after this video. Back when I used to be big into mysticism and the occult on my old channel, I used to work with different entities, and I never really specified whether those were psychological things within the self or whether they were spiritual, and at different times in my life I believed them to be different things. Not the point. Early into my practice I worked with a being called Ishtar, which was a representation of the goddess Ishtar from ancient Babylonian and Sumerian cultures. Later I worked with Tiamat, who many may remember was my matron goddess for a while, and then later I worked with the Morgan, who is the one that's most memorable to everyone because most of the change that I went through as I accepted all the shadow parts of myself, all of the hidden parts of myself, happened while working with the Morgan. But I never really talked too much about the specifics of working with these individuals and things that were revealed to me toward the end. Toward the end of me working with the Morgan admitted to me something very interesting. She said that she was in fact all of the beings and goddesses that I had worked with before, including Tiamat and Ishtar, and was not specifically the Morgan, as I come to understand it, was not the goddess of the Celtic lore, but was rather something else. I was never able to really grasp what she was supposed to be when she told me this. I always got this explanation that was akin to saying, I am the synchronicity, or I am the weaving of fate, or something along that nature, or I am magic itself, whatever that is. So I got this impression that I was working with something and had been working with something long term that was not in actuality the gods, goddesses, whatever that I had believed them to be all along. Now later, I took this to mean that it was really my own Psyche that I had been working with, that she was a representation of my own subconscious mind, or perhaps my artistic nature, my creative side, manifesting itself in a way that I could talk to. But now that we're back to this point where I'm starting to see things as both spiritual and psychological again, I have to call all of that into question again and say, what did she actually mean? Additionally, about 2 to 3 weeks after I finished all of my work on ROTA and the history of the Kildor, and I finally came to grips with accepting, yeah, there's something to all of this, I started to hear her again. Insanity alert for anyone out there who says hearing voices in your head means you're crazy, but it's kind of the way it used to be too. So now I can hear her, and I've recently had some interactions in dreams with a being that called itself Enki, which she has now told me was also her. And so I've come to recognize that all of these beings I've ever worked with are, in a sense, this same singular being. Now, is this being some representation of self? It still could be. Is it something external? Could be that. This video is not to explain where this being comes from, whether it's an actual outside being or some part of my mind. This video is coming to accept what am I going to call this when I talk about this in other videos. So I know this thing is not actually the Morgan, or Ishtar, or Tiamat, but is something that's able to help guide me on my path forward. I don't know whether it's a real separate entity or part of my mind or both. But I do know that when I follow the teachings this thing leads me down, it moves me towards becoming a better person. So I'm going to refer to it from here on out as the teacher. So if you hear me say the teacher told me, and then I explain something, that's what I'm talking about. Moving forward, I'm not going to explain the fact that I already know this could all be psychological. I'm not going to explain the fact that I already know that it could be a spiritual thing. I'm not going to explain the fact that it could be the universe speaking to me through a conduit that I'm imagining, allowing that to come into my mind. I get all these concepts, but the truth of the matter is it doesn't matter which one is right. One way or another, this thing, I hear it, I react based on what it says, and I learn. So, ergo, I call it the teacher, moving forward and forevermore. Now, what do I think this thing is? Well, that's interesting. So, as I've done some research recently, I've come to find that there's a lot of concepts that point to something very similar to what I'm describing. One of them, in particular, is called the Daemon. The Daemon is this ancient Greek concept of some other self that you're born with, and this other self often represents your creative side. Some believe this to be an actual external entity that's like a guardian angel that's with you. Some believed it to be a part of yourself. Most people think that it appears to you as the opposite gender, which matches my own experiences. If we go psychological on this, Carl Jung talked about something called the Anima or Animus. Men, according to him, had an Anima, a female other. Women had an Animus, a male other. It basically represented the feminine or masculine parts of the self that were rejected for some reason, coming together into some kind of form. It also represented all peoples other than yourself in a single thing. In other words, it basically represents the other, the outside of you. It's the part of you that is everything that you don't associate with your current persona. According to this concept, you can use it to help you with shadow work, just like we were talking about, to get to know the real you inside, and eventually you can even come to understand that it's a part of you. Members of the Golden Dawn work towards something they call communion with the Holy Guardian Angel. This Holy Guardian Angel is a higher self, a form of yourself that is angelic, godlike, whatever. It is the perfect, unified you. This thing, they say, you can speak to as if it's a separate entity, although it is really just the fullness of who you are on the inside, which you just haven't fully recognized yet. Members of spiritual communities often talk about the higher self, pulling into the self that which you truly are, the greater you, so that you can make certain decisions or get certain information that you don't normally have. I feel like all of these concepts are talking about the same thing, but at the same time, I don't feel like any of these concepts 100% grasp what that thing is. I am going to be calling this thing the teacher, because that is the only part of this that I'm certain of. It guides me toward betterment of the self. And when I say betterment of the self, I don't mean becoming more wealthy or having better situations. Quite the opposite. The teacher has told me that going on this path that I've chosen is actually going to be very difficult. This path is about unlocking the unknown, unlocking things about the self, unlocking things about the world, coming to realizations and becoming a better person mentally, physically, spiritually. It has nothing to do with your physical reality, monetary type of stuff. If you're someone who's into magic because you're trying to make money, or because you're trying to get women, or any of the myriad of other reasons a lot of people get involved in the occult, this part of it is not your thing. I got into it for power reasons and stuff, just like a lot of people originally. I think that's why I had to be derailed off of the way that I had initially come in, and now come back through this other way. But this is what I'm about now, so it's all spiritual, it's all knowing the self, it's all self-progression for me, at least at current. What do I think is going on? Well, I have a theory that this thing that is speaking to me is something akin to the universe, or the all, or whatever you want to call it. Some might even call it God. And I'm not saying I hear the voice of God, I'm saying that something is speaking to me. It may be a part of me, but it does so through some imagined conduit. So I might envision a beautiful female form for this being to inhabit, but the thing that's talking to me is not that envisioned form. That's just a conduit for me to talk to whatever this is. In fact, since I've regained the ability to speak to it, and it has begun to tell me that it is not actually these deities, but rather is this other thing, I have noticed that every time it shows up now, it shows up in a completely different form. It just shapeshifts into whatever my mind wants to give form to this voice, so that the voice can speak to me. Sometimes there's not even a form, I just hear it. Sometimes it's just my own voice in the back of my head, like a conscience. But there's always this feeling that runs through my body, like a knowing. And I don't know how to explain it other than that. If you have had the feeling of seeing your significant other as they've come back from a trip, and you see them and you recognize them and you know it's them and you get this feeling in your body like, that's them. That's the feeling I get anytime this teacher appears. Anytime this teacher speaks to me, I get the exact same feeling that it's the exact same being, and I know within my heart of hearts that I'm talking to the teacher. But its form now is nebulous. It comes in sometimes looking like the Morgan. It comes in sometimes looking like a room full of darkness, eyes, and mouths. It's crazy. Am I insane? Quite possibly. But the point is, whatever it is that's speaking behind whatever illusionary image I give it, that's the thing that is the teacher. I think this thing may very well be just the universe, although another way of looking at it might be the creative part of myself that recognizes the beauty in a sunset, that can verbalize this to the logical part of myself that just sees this gaseous thing coming down over the horizon. Is it part of me? Is it out of me? Is it both? Maybe. One way or another, connecting with it, speaking with it, working with it, moves me toward betterment. So how should you guys translate it in the future when I say, the teacher told me this? It just means that I got the impression of this thing, and the place that that impression came from is from the same place where I'm getting these other concepts. Is it from my own mind? Is it from an entity? Is it from God? Is it from the universe? That is all up for debate, up for speculation. I'm not claiming any of that. The teacher is just the explanation I'm going to use for any time the information I'm talking about comes from the teacher. One of the things the teacher has explained to me is that I need to let go of caring about a lot of this stuff. And in fact, I've had this echoed to me by a friend of mine, Milton Knowles, very recently as well. One of the main reasons I'm making this video isn't because I think it's important for people to understand the concept of the teacher. I think it's important for me to let go of worrying about what the fuck the teacher is. And so by calling it the teacher, I'm doing that. But I had to make this video so people know what the fuck I'm talking about. In upcoming videos, I'll be talking about things I learned from the teacher and things I've learned from my own experiences. I'd like to thank my circle of magi, as always, for their support. I'd like to thank everyone else who's watching here. And until next time, safe travels.